One of the problems that I personally have with the concept of a perfect, omniscient, and omnipotent deity is not one of the usual ones you'd hear, such as the problem of free will or the problem of evil. Let's call it the problem of why bother? Why would an all-knowing and all-powerful being bother to create a universe, let alone mankind or three-toed sloths? Maybe it's my lazy nature speaking, but what's in it for him? He wanted to see how things would turn out. He already knows how things will turn out. He's all-knowing. He wanted to see if he could. Of course he could. He's all-powerful. He was lonely. He needed company. Well, that's kind of an endearing notion, but isn't loneliness a kind of defect, not something you'd expect to find in the perfect being? And if you know exactly everything another entity will ever say or do or think, can that being really address your loneliness? It would be as if an adult human was feeling lonely and bought a baby doll that says, "Feed me," when you press the button. We would say that person is most likely mentally ill. Did God create the universe because he wanted to be worshipped? It's the same thing. That would be a defect. And again, if you know everything about everything, why would this be any different than buying a doll that says, "I love you," when you push the button? Again, it would be an easy call of mental illness if we saw an adult needing such a thing. And again, from God's perspective, what is the point of the whole exercise? Why bother? It's also trivial from the point of view of a perfect and omniscient deity. Now, the reflex response of any religious person is to say, how can you presume to know God's needs or desires or why he does what he does? It doesn't have to make sense to you. But I don't see how it can be presumptuous to ask these questions if it's just the natural outcome of all these things that we do claim to know about God, namely that he's omniscient, omnipotent, and perfect. If we're already presuming to know everything significant about God, at that point you can't say, hey, how dare you presume things about God? It's kind of as if you called me a lazy, no-good, degenerate, inbred sloth, and in return, I called you a dummy. And then you say, hey, let's not get personal. It was already personal. And it's already personal here. You are telling me God has certain features. I'm saying that based on those features, God's actions don't make sense. So you tell me that I don't really understand God's features. But if I don't understand God's features, then you didn't understand God's features either. So what are you talking about in the first place? So I'm going to go ahead and say that a more plausible conception of God would have to eliminate God's omniscience, at the very least, if not his perfection. This has a lot of consequences, of course, but at least it makes his creation of the universe understandable. He wanted to see what would happen, how things would turn out, what his creations would accomplish, and so on, because he genuinely does not know. For what it's worth, this actually resonates with the character of God in the Bible, who seems to be constantly surprised by every turn of events, continuously updating and revising his plans on the fly. So God set things in motion because he was curious what would happen. That would make the most sense to me if I were to believe that there was a God at all. He was driven by the desire to know. And also, maybe he was a bit lonely.